There are exactly 4 sounds in Vincent Ashford's world. The grandfather clock in the entrance hall, marking each hollow second. The wind scraping against the windows of his empty mansion. His own footsteps echoing through rooms that haven't heard a human voice in 34 years. And today, for the first time since 1989, a 5th sound shatters the silence. The soft scrape of paper sliding beneath his door. Vincent's hands freeze over his breakfast. He hasn't received mail in decades. No one knows he exists here, no one should. Yet there it is, a cream-colored envelope lying on the marble floor like an accusation. His fortune is estimated at $180 million, built through brilliance and ruthless isolation. But in this moment, Vincent Ashford is terrified of a piece of paper. The estate sprawls across 70 acres of Berkshire Mountains woodland in Massachusetts, surrounded by walls he commissioned in 1990. 12-foot stone barriers topped with iron spikes, not to keep intruders out, but to keep his past from finding him. Inside, the house is a museum of abandonment. 62 rooms, most of them locked and dark. He lives in just 5: bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, study, and the vast library where he monitors his investments and watches the world through screens instead of windows. There are no photographs on display, no personal effects. Nothing that might remind him of what he sacrificed for this perfect, terrible piece. Vincent is 76 now, though he barely notices time passing anymore. Days blend into weeks, into years, all identical, all safe, all suffocating. He hasn't spoken to another human being since the night he walked out of his own charity gala and swore he was done with every single person who called themselves his friend, his partner, his family. If you've ever wondered what it cost to build a fortress around your heart, stay until the end of this story. If this resonates with you, leave a like and subscribe, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about isolation and redemption. Vincent doesn't touch the envelope for 6 hours. It sits on the entrance table while he completes his routine with mechanical precision. 5-mile walk through the property perimeter, stock market analysis, lunch eaten standing at the kitchen counter, more monitoring of accounts that grow larger while meaning less with each passing year. But the envelope is there in his peripheral vision, in his thoughts, disrupting the careful numbness he's cultivated like a garden. At 3 in the afternoon, when shadows begin stretching across the marble floors, he finally approaches it. The handwriting is shaky but deliberate, written by someone who took great care with each letter. There's no return address, just 5 words that stop his heart. From Eleanor, your sister, Vincent. Eleanor. The name detonates in his mind like a flash grenade, illuminating memories he buried so deep he convinced himself they were fiction. Eleanor with pigtails running through their childhood home in Boston. Eleanor at 16, brilliant and wild and always in his shadow. Eleanor at 28, working in his company, hungry to prove herself. Eleanor who he hasn't thought about, hasn't allowed himself to think about, since the night everything collapsed. His fingers tremble as he tears the envelope open. The letter inside is 2 pages, handwritten on simple lined paper, and the first sentence makes him sit down hard on the floor where he stands. Vincent, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you even remember me, or if you've spent these decades the way I have, turning that night over and over in your mind, wondering if any of it could have been different. I'm writing from Portland Mercy Hospice. The doctors tell me I have weeks, maybe a month if I'm lucky, though I'm not sure luck has anything to do with any of this anymore. I'm dying, Vincent, and before I go, I need you to know the truth about what happened in 1989. It wasn't James who betrayed you. Vincent's vision blurs. James Patterson, his business partner, his college roommate, the man he trusted more than anyone in the world until the night of the Ashford Foundation charity gala when everything went to hell. $20 million missing from the foundation accounts. Evidence pointing directly to James. A confrontation in front of 200 guests that ended with James silent, refusing to defend himself, just staring at Vincent with something that looked like pity, while Vincent screamed accusations and security escorted James out. The next day, James resigned and disappeared. Within a week, Vincent had fired everyone close to him, convinced the betrayal went deeper, convinced everyone he knew was either complicit or would eventually disappoint him the same way. He sold his penthouse, bought this isolated estate, and systematically cut every human connection from his life like a surgeon removing tumors. The letter continues. It was me, Vincent. I was the one who took the money. I was young and stupid and drowning in gambling debts I'd hidden from everyone, including you, especially you, because you were the golden child who never made mistakes, and I was so tired of living in your shadow. I saw an opening in the foundation accounts and I took it, and when the auditors found the discrepancy, James knew immediately it was me. He confronted me privately the morning before the gala. I broke down and told him everything, and Vincent, he did something I'll never understand and will never deserve. He doctored the evidence to make it look like he was responsible. He said you'd forgive a partner's mistake eventually, but you'd never forgive your little sister's betrayal, and he couldn't watch me destroy you the way he knew it would. He took the fall for me. He let you hate him. He disappeared to protect me, and I was too much of a coward to tell you the truth. Vincent's hands are shaking so violently he can barely read the final paragraph. James died 10 years ago, Vincent. Heart attack. Alone in an apartment in Seattle. He never told anyone what really happened. He kept my secret until the very end. I've lived with this guilt every day since that night, watching from a distance as you vanished from the world, knowing I was the reason. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know before I die that the man you hated was innocent, and the isolation you chose was built on a lie I created. I'm at Portland Mercy Hospice, room 217. I don't know if you'll come. I don't know if there's anything left between us worth saving, but I had to try. Your sister, Eleanor. The letter falls from Vincent's hands. 34 years. 34 years of isolation, of hatred carefully maintained, of pride worn like armor. All of it based on a lie. James was innocent. Everyone he pushed away, every friendship he destroyed, every bridge he burned, all of it unnecessary. The room spins around him, and for the first time since 1989, Vincent Ashford does something he thought he'd forgotten how to do. He cries. Not quiet tears, but wrenching, gasping sobs that echo through the empty house like the building itself is weeping. 34 years of frozen emotion melting all at once, and the flood is devastating. He cries for James, who sacrificed everything to protect a family that wasn't even his own. He cries for Eleanor, carrying that guilt alone for decades. He cries for himself, for the prison he built brick by brick, for the life he could have had, for every morning he woke up in this mausoleum and convinced himself he was safer this way. When the tears finally stop, he's lying on the floor in the entrance hall. The letter clutched against his chest, and the grandfather clock is striking 8 in the evening. 5 hours have passed. The sun has set. And Vincent Ashford makes a decision that terrifies him more than anything has in 3 decades. He's going to Portland. He's going to see Eleanor. He's going to step outside these walls and back into the world he abandoned. The logistics are almost funny, if they weren't so pathetic. He hasn't driven a car since 1991. Hasn't been in public since 1990. Hasn't had a conversation with another human being that wasn't through a computer screen or a brief interaction with delivery people who leave packages at the gate without ever seeing his face. He doesn't own a cell phone. He's not sure he remembers how to make small talk. The idea of walking into a gas station, a restaurant, a hotel, any space where people exist and interact, fills him with a dread so profound it's almost paralyzing. But the alternative is letting Eleanor die alone, believing her brother hated her, and Vincent has already wasted 34 years on hatred he had no right to feel. The next morning, he does something he hasn't done since the first Bush administration. He puts on clothes meant to be seen by other people. The suit he finds in his closet is decades out of style, but it fits well enough. He looks in the mirror and sees a stranger, a gaunt old man with wild white hair and eyes that have forgotten how to meet another person's gaze. He looks like exactly what he is, someone who's been buried alive and is trying to claw his way back to the surface. The keys to his Mercedes are in a drawer in the study, covered in dust. He hasn't started the car in years, but he's paid someone remotely to maintain it, one of the few connections to the outside world he's maintained. It starts on the third try, engine coughing to life like it's surprised to be needed. The gate at the end of his driveway opens slowly, so slowly, and Vincent sits with his foot on the brake staring at the road beyond. 400 miles to Portland. An impossible distance. He could turn around right now, delete the letter from his mind, return to the silence he knows. It would be so much easier. But then he thinks of James, taking the blame without a word of protest, and he thinks of Eleanor in a hospice bed, dying with this weight on her soul, and he presses the accelerator. The car rolls forward and through the gate, and Vincent Ashford leaves his property for the first time in 34 years. The world beyond his walls is shocking in its normalcy. Houses with lights on and families visible through windows, cars passing with drivers who don't give him a second glance, a neighborhood he's technically lived in for decades but has never actually seen. Everything is familiar and completely alien at the same time. His first stop comes 15 miles down the road when the fuel light comes on, a detail he didn't think to check. There's a gas station ahead, bright and modern and full of people, and Vincent's hands tighten on the steering wheel until his knuckles are white. He could drive until the tank is empty and call this whole thing a failed attempt, proof that he's too far gone to rejoin humanity. Instead, he pulls into the station, parks at the farthest pump, and sits in the car trying to remember how this works. A young man in his 20s, nose ring and tattoos covering his arms, approaches the window. Vincent rolls it down an inch. "Can I help you?" the young man asks, and Vincent's voice when he finally speaks is rusty and strange even to his own ears. "I need gas. I don't remember how." The young man's expression shifts from confusion to something like kindness. "No worries, man. Prepay inside or I can run your card out here." "Cash," Vincent says, pulling out his wallet. The young man takes the bills and starts the pump, and Vincent sits there feeling like he's just completed an Everest summit. "But here's what I want to know. If you discovered that 34 years of your life were based on a lie, would you have the courage to face what you'd lost, or would you retreat back into the comfort of what you knew? Let me know in the comments." Vincent drives through the night because stopping means thinking, and thinking means the possibility of turning back. The highway unspools before him, towns passing like ghosts, rest stops glowing like lighthouses. Somewhere in New Hampshire, exhaustion forces him to pull into a roadside diner, the kind of place that hasn't changed since the 70s, all chrome and red vinyl and the smell of coffee that's been on the burner too long. He sits in a booth by the window, hands wrapped around a cup he hasn't actually drunk from, watching the few other patrons with an anthropologist's fascination. A truck driver scrolling through his phone, a young couple holding hands across the table. A waitress who moves between tables with practiced efficiency, her name tag reading Ruby. She's in her 50s, grey streaking through dark hair, and she has the look of someone who's seen every kind of human the world produces and isn't surprised by any of them anymore. She refills his coffee without asking, and studies him with eyes that are kind but not intrusive. "Long drive," she observes, and it's not really a question. "Yes," Vincent manages. "Where you headed?" "Portland," he says, and then because he hasn't had a real conversation in decades and doesn't know the rules anymore, he adds, "To see my sister before she dies." Ruby doesn't react with the awkward sympathy most people would offer. She just nods, like this makes perfect sense. "That's good," she says. "How long since you've seen her?" 34 years. Now Ruby's eyebrows rise slightly. "That's a long time to carry whatever you've been carrying." "It wasn't her fault," Vincent hears himself saying. "I thought it was, but it wasn't. I wasted 34 years being angry at the wrong people." Ruby tops off his coffee again, even though he hasn't touched it. "Then don't waste another second," she says simply. Your sister's waiting. Life's too short for the wrong kind of loneliness. She walks away before he can respond, leaving him with words that feel like they've cracked something open in his chest. He leaves cash on the table, far more than the bill requires, and walks back to his car feeling lighter and more terrified than before. Portland Mercy Hospice appears just after dawn, a low building of warm brick and large windows, designed to let in as much natural light as possible. Vincent parks in the visitor lot and sits in the car for 20 minutes, watching people come and go, nurses in scrubs, families carrying flowers, a priest with a worn Bible under his arm. All of them moving through grief with a grace he doesn't possess. Finally, because Eleanor is dying and time is the one thing he can't negotiate with, he gets out of the car. The lobby is quiet and smells like antiseptic and something floral he can't identify. The woman at the desk is middle-aged and patient, and when he says he's here to see Eleanor Ashford in room 217, she smiles. "She's been asking about you," the woman says. "She said you'd come." Vincent wants to ask how Eleanor could possibly have known, but he's afraid of the answer. Room 217 is at the end of a long corridor, and each step feels like walking to his own execution. He pauses outside the door, hand on the handle, heart hammering in his chest. He could still leave. She'd never know he was here. But then he thinks of James taking the blame in silence, and he thinks of Ruby saying life's too short for the wrong kind of loneliness, and he pushes the door open. Eleanor is smaller than he remembers, diminished by illness and age, and the weight of secrets carried too long. She's propped up in bed, oxygen tubes in her nose, but her eyes when they meet his are still the same, sharp and bright, and so achingly familiar that Vincent feels 34 years collapse into nothing. "Vinny," she whispers, using the nickname no one else has ever called him, and whatever walls Vincent has left just crumble to dust. "I'm so sorry," he says, crossing the room, and Eleanor reaches for his hand with fingers that feel like bird bones. "I'm the one who's sorry," she says. "I've been sorry every day since." Vincent sits in the chair beside her bed, and for the first time in 34 years he's not alone. Eleanor lives for 3 more weeks, and they are the most important weeks of Vincent Ashford's life. He rents a room at a hotel near the hospice and spends every day at her bedside, filling in the gaps of 3.5 decades. She tells him about her son, Michael, who Vincent never knew existed, a marine biologist in his 40s, with Eleanor's sharp wit and a quiet dignity that reminds Vincent painfully of James. She tells him about her years in recovery after conquering the gambling addiction that started all of this, about building a small life in Portland that was honest, even if it could never make up for the lie that preceded it. Vincent tells her about the empire he built in isolation, about the fortune that grew while his soul shriveled, about the moment he realized he'd forgotten how to be human. They cry together often. They laugh more than Vincent would have thought possible. And on the last day, when Eleanor's breathing is shallow and her eyes are beginning to look past him into whatever comes next, she squeezes his hand with surprising strength and says, "Promise me, you won't go back to those walls, Vinny. Promise me, you'll live the time you have left." He promises, and he means it. And 6 hours later, Eleanor Ashford dies with her brother holding her hand and her son on the other side. 3 generations of mistakes and forgiveness converging in a hospital room that smells like disinfectant and flowers. The funeral is small, just Vincent and Michael and a handful of Eleanor's friends from her support groups and neighborhood. Vincent meets people who loved his sister, who knew her as someone kind and funny and deeply flawed and trying every day to be better. He realizes he missed knowing this version of Eleanor, and the grief is compounded by all the years he could have had with her if pride hadn't turned him into a ghost. But standing at her graveside, watching the coffin lower into the ground, Vincent makes another decision. He's not going back to the fortress. He's not going to waste whatever time he has left, repeating the mistakes of the last 34 years. Eleanor's death is not going to be meaningless. 6 months later, the transformation is remarkable. The walls around Vincent's estate are coming down, demolished by construction crews who work from dawn to dusk. The mansion is being converted into a retreat center for people struggling with isolation, grief, and the paralyzing weight of unforgiven mistakes. He calls it the Eleanor and James Foundation, named for the two people who paid the highest price for his inability to see past his own pain. Ruby, the waitress from the diner in New Hampshire, is the director, having accepted his offer with a smile that suggested she knew all along she'd be hearing from him again. Vincent himself is unrecognizable. He volunteers at the hospice where Eleanor died, sitting with patients who have no family, being the presence he wished someone had been for James. He reconnects with people from his past where possible, apologizing for his decades of silence, rebuilding bridges he thought were permanently burned. Some accept his apologies, some don't. He's learning to live with both outcomes. The locked room in his house, the one he avoided for 34 years, is now a memorial. Photographs of everyone he pushed away cover the walls, faces of people he loved and lost, and is slowly, painfully trying to find again. In the center is a photograph of James Patterson, smiling at the camera with the kind of open, genuine joy that comes from a life lived without bitterness. Next to it is Eleanor's last letter, framed, a reminder that redemption sometimes arrives in the most unexpected envelopes. Vincent Ashford is 77 years old now. He doesn't know how much time he has left, but he knows this. He spent 34 years building a prison and calling it safety, and he's going to spend whatever remains tearing down walls wherever he finds them, in himself and in others. Isolation promised him protection, but delivered only slow death. Forgiveness terrified him, but gave him back his life. So here's my question for you. Have you built walls you're afraid to tear down? Are you carrying guilt or anger that's slowly turning you into a ghost? Tell me your story in the comments below. Or if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who's isolated themselves from the world, share this video with them. Sometimes the right story at the right time can be the letter that changes everything. Your story matters, and I want to hear it. Let's build a community where forgiveness and second chances aren't just possible but celebrated. Subscribe to this channel if these stories resonate with you, because there are so many more voices that need to be heard, including yours.